You're listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast.
You're listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast. My name is Shawn Wilkie, and along with my awesome co-host, we interview the innovators in this space every week. Ivan, please go ahead and get us started.
Hey, I'm Zach. Very excited to introduce you to Jonathan Greene. Jonathan is a president of J.A. Greene Construction Services, has been designing and building commercial projects for over 20 years. Designing and constructing over $30 million worth of veterinary hospitals has required an understanding of how veterinarians operate in their hospitals and how animals respond to their environment. As an advocate for doctors, he strives to build functional, uncomplicated, and visually appealing hospitals for each client. Jonathan graduated from Sam Houston State University with his Bachelor of Science in Design and Development. Jonathan, welcome to the show. Thank you for finding the time.
Thank y'all.
So this is an interesting topic. So we're in this is a subtle shout out for myself. We're in consolidation space. So we're I don't like to call us corporate, but we are, and we're growing through acquisition. But there is a building arm that we're standing up. So for someone that is starting either to think about building a hospital or think as the group or consolidator to stand up that whole arm or building de novos within their structure, how soon before they want the doors open to engage with someone like yourself?
As early as possible. The value that we bring to whether it's corporate or whether it's an individual starting up a hospital, the value we bring early on is perfect. We can step in and say, here's your challenges from a construction standpoint. Here's your challenges from a design standpoint. Here's site A and site B. Here's the difference in your construction cost between those two sites or those two buildings. And then we can do test fitting to make sure that everything that you need to fit in the space to make your ROI can happen. I simply can't understand how someone could sign a lease or buy property without knowing exactly what can fit on either one. This doesn't make any sense to me.
I just heard of a great example of that just the other day. Ivan, a good friend of ours that's starting a hospital in San Francisco. I'll protect the name of the innocent. They signed a lease. They want an MRI at their facility, and there's no room for it. So this stuff happens all the time. It turns out to people that we know.
Yeah. Well, okay. So let me put it this way again, as a person who knows very little about the construction. So let's say I'm a veterinarian. What is the checklist before I contact you? So do I need to know the site, the street, where I want to build? Let's say I just, I've worked for someone for 3 years and I want to build a hospital. Let's call it San Francisco. Do you help with the site suggestion selection, or would you sit down with that person and then go over what are you trying to fit in? What are the services? And then what kind of building to look for? Like what is the checklist of things to know or to have to come and talk to you and start the conversation?
So there's really not a checklist. We very much will get brought in and asked to look at different sites. So, and when they want our opinion, they want to know, are utilities available? Do we have, stormwater retention problems? All these different things are what we're looking at in the initial stage. So there's really no checklist because every property is different. So we have to look at it and then we're like, okay, here's your challenges. Here's what your broker should go and ask the seller. What are they representing? Where are all the essential items that it takes for you to open this practice on this land or in this building?
So interesting, Jonathan. So it sounds like to me, you should be their first call before they even call their real estate agent. Because if I think back to the example of a friend of mine and Ivan's, the issue was not the size, it was the power. They were not able to get enough power to power the MRI without having to do like an insane amount of work with the site that they wanted to move forward with. Are things like that pretty common?
It is. Yeah. And it's pretty easy to figure out. It's not hard for someone who's in the industry to go into a site and be like, okay, this is going to be a problem for all these various reasons. And we're not all, I wouldn't say the real estate we would get contacted before the real estate broker. But we're certainly there pretty close. And the real estate brokers, I guess an easier way to put it, most doctors know where they want to go. So a lot of times it'd be like, hey, Jonathan, we want to open one here in northeast side of town. And when you go look at what land's available, there's not going to be 10,000 pieces of property. There's going to be a finite amount of land available. And we can easily just tell them, here's pros and cons. Even from Google. Heck, I don't have to go to the site. I can just Google it.
That's cool. So here's the question about the money. So let's say I'm putting the business plan together and I want to build a hospital. And then at what point does someone contact you? Because obviously, the earlier you do, the better. But then at what point when we contact you, we need to start paying? Because, money is a scarce resource sometimes, and you're trying to budget things. So sometimes people would think that, well, if I'll call the contractor too early, then I'm going to start paying for design and the services and the assessment and stuff like that. So in your company, when does the billing start in this process?
Right. So typically it doesn't start until we actually produce documents that are substantial, is the easiest way to put it. And by substantial, we mean something that other people could look at and review. So in the project infancy, we don't go after the wallet first, because we know there's no value in charging them for every single thing, every single consultation or drawing that we do in the beginning, whether they don't have the money or they're going to open a loan. If we make them pay us day one, that opens their loan and they start paying interim interest. So as an advocate for the client, that's not, you're not advocating for them when you do that. You're simply just trying to bill them. And we certainly don't want the relationship to start off, about money. We want it to start off about what you want, what you need, and how we can help.
Yeah, it's so interesting. It's such a complex thing, building a veterinary hospital. So I've done a bit of property development in the past, never vet hospitals, but real estate development and apartments and short-term and long-term rentals. And my brother's a contractor, and man, oh man, you learn some lessons the hard way when you're trying to build things and you don't really know what you're doing. It's much easier to put, for example, like structured cabling in when the walls are not up and the drywall and the painting hasn't been done. I've done that before. So what things would you tell somebody that, maybe they've built a house before, and maybe they were a general contractor, or maybe they've never built anything before. And they're thinking, you know what, I'm going to save some money. I'm going to design this hospital myself because I'm really smart and I know exactly where I want things to be. What would you say to those people as they're looking to kind of go out and put that, 3, 4, $5 million investment and kind of run it themselves? What kind of costs are involved having you guys do it, and where are the savings?
And before you jump in, and how often does it happen that veterinarians come in and think that they're smarter than you and try to do it themselves? Be honest.
I'll start with that one first. So generally speaking, veterinarians are some of the most respectful, down to earth clients that we have. And we operate in a lot of other medical fields. Veterinarians, I think, historically are resourceful. And that resourcefulness really, really lends itself to being respectful. So it's very uncommon that we have a veterinarian come in and, think they know what they're talking about. Usually, to be frank, it's the husband of the veterinarian is usually where the problems start, because that husband thinks that he's the protector of the wife's practice, and the big bad contractor is just going to be there and take advantage of her. And there's certainly contractors that are terrible, but that's just not what we do. They're our favorite clients. And I'm not just saying that because we're on this podcast and people can listen to it and all that. They really are our favorite clients.
And to answer Shawn's question on where does this sort of saving happen, what people think the saving, if I'm thinking about the hospital, should I contact, because for the most part, they know what they want from the workflow perspective, right? So they want to say, okay, I want, this number of exam rooms. I want this to be connected on the back end with a treatment area. And then I want 2 ORs. One is, for this purpose, and this is for dirty, like dental. And then is that the stage where one would come in and say what kind of property we should look for? Or the land, and by the way, are you doing both? Are you doing from sort of ground up and renovations, or
we do everything: interior remodels, tenant improvements, and a tenant building and ground up construction. We've touched on all those different types of projects. I think it's pretty rare that a veterinarian starting a practice would come to me and say, "Here's what I want." They're really saying, "Here's what I want to do. What do I need to do it?" They'll come in, and one of the biggest mistakes that they make is exam rooms. And they say, okay, I want 4 exam rooms. I'm like, that means you need 6. That probably means you need 7. That's one of the biggest mistakes they make, is they think they only need 4, but they're not thinking about year 5. They're thinking about right away when they're the only person there, the only doctor. So yeah, I mean, it's rare that they come to us with the exact content that they want.
And then in terms of design, so for example, if now speaking as a sort of group, if you want a certain design that will, because not every building is equipped the same way, but for the interior design that fits the brand, if you will, is that something that you work with? And who is the team that you're working with? Is it their marketing team? Do you have the team of designers? And what does that project look like if you were to design, let's say, a line of de novo hospitals for a group?
Yeah, so it's really pretty simple. The logo and the marketing side of what they're going to do really has to coexist with the interior design of the practice. It also has to coexist, maybe not so much on the de novo side, but on the single practitioner side. It has to exist, the connection between the veterinarian's personality and their design, right? You can't be an energetic, fun-going veterinarian, right, and then build a hospital that is like cold, unassuming. There's a disconnect, and that disconnect, the clients will sense it, because they'll walk in and be like, okay, this is drab, and then they'll talk to a veterinarian who's hyper, and they're like, what, this doesn't make any sense, and there's a connection there for sure. But we'll do, yeah, I mean, typically we just ask for your logo, what kind of branding you're going to look like, and we want the interior design to match it. We'll do 3D color renders of the interior of the space, so that we'll show them, we'll put their logo in the background, wherever the logo wall is on the 3D color render, and we'll kind of make everything make sense.
That's awesome. So let's take a turn. Tell us some of the horror stories. Like, what's the craziest thing that you've saw fucked up in a hospital since you've been doing this?
So the craziest thing I ever experienced was I walked into a hospital, and there were holes in the bottom of the walls to the exterior all over this place. And this was a busy hospital, kind of in the heart of Houston, right? And I was like, okay. And they're like, we want to renovate. And I'm like, no, I can push this building down right now. And I was like, why are there holes? Why is this okay? All these questions. And they're like, oh, it floods, every other month. So we just let the water go through the practice.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was great. And everyone that I talked to, the doctor, the staff, the vet tech, they all acted like this was normal.
What was the solution to that? Like, were you like just demolish and move or what?
That's exactly what I told them. And we ended up, that's exactly what we did, is we built a building behind them, on a quarter acre, and let them stay in practice in this, crappy building, and then moved them out. I couldn't imagine why they wanted to remodel, And that's kind of when I learned that one of the more important aspects of veterinary design is how you take care of the staff, because that facility wasn't why those people came back. It was the staff. I mean, I watched one kennel tech cuddle a dog over garbage, essentially, and that's what they want, is that relationship. So we got to take care of the staff. The design has to take care of the staff too. It can't just take care of the animals or anything else. The staff has to be on the forefront.
That's so interesting. I was just in LA a couple of weeks ago, and we were looking at some practices, and we walked into this practice. Lovely owner, nice guy, but I'm like, man, this has to be like so old. Like, it just felt like it was a storage. It was kind of his office, and then it was all like kind of mixed in, and it looked like someone practiced there for like at least 50 years. So then we sat down, and we're thinking about partnering up. Obviously there needs to be some renovations. I'm thinking of just immediately thinking that this will need a facelift. And then as we sat down, he says, well, last year we had to, because we were looking at finance, and he said we had to close because we just renovated. I was like, whoa, what did it look like before? So it's interesting, because I think it was one of those that uncle came in and painted the walls and stuff like that. But when you're looking at the hospital, and let's say someone, the consolidator or the private owner, bought the practice, and obviously it's kind of a rundown look, how do you explain to people the budget allocated to CapEx there? Because it's hard to say what is the return on investment immediately. It's like, okay, well, I'm not going to do more procedures or faster procedures if I fix, the look of it. People are still coming. So the frugal kind of CFOs will tell you, well, let's not touch these things. People are coming here anyway. Do you have a sort of a common conversation that you have with the owner to kind of, how would you recommend and how would you justify the renovation and CapEx expense?
Yeah, it's not always about what they're going to gain immediately. Really, the conversations that I think really resonate with them whenever they ask those kinds of questions is we then start, well, what's your exit strategy? Are you going to sell in 5 years? Are you going to sell in 10 years? Are you going to hold on to it? Because you're not selling this practice at a premium like the way it is. Second is, are you going to be a single practitioner for the next 20 years, or you want an associate? You're not recruiting an associate to this practice looking the way it is. They're coming out of these vet schools that are pristine. They have every single bell and whistle they could possibly want. And they're coming in here, and you got scissors, as right here for, not that they use a scissors for a procedure, but the equivalent of that, so you have to have those conversations, or they're going to miss the boat.
That's fascinating. And I think that, a brand new hospital with all of the latest gear in a nice location is a retention and a recruitment tool. I love what you said about the staff. It's genius. One of the things that we were chatting about earlier, Jonathan, before we started the show, besides us actually both starting a business with the same guy, shout out to Mr. Brian Poteet, which is kind of interesting, was this idea of cheap, fast, or good. Choose two. And I love that because when you're trying to build something, you're thinking you want all three of those things. So can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I didn't make that up. I stole that from somebody. I don't know who I stole it from, but when I heard it, I was like, man, that's great. So yeah, cheap, fast, or good. Pick two. You're not going to get all three. If you want it fast and you want it good, it's not going to be cheap. If you want it good and cheap, it's not going to be fast. They're not synonymous with each other. And that's really the question one that we should be asking our clients is you want it cheap, fast, or good, pick two of them. And we don't, because I'm simply not that brave enough to ask my clients in the initial consultation what they want. Cause I think at that point it's negative and they're like, okay, this guy, is a jerk. I'm not going to, he thinks I want it cheap or he thinks I want it fast. It's like, I don't know what you want. I want to have an honest conversation with you about it. So it's something I wish we addressed more, but it's certainly the elephant in the room. And they all three have their benefits. There are times when you need to be fast, right? You just signed a lease. You forgot you needed to get drawings done. You got to be fast now. So now we're going to have to, bypass some quality, and we're going to have to take some risk on the quality side of things. It's just the way it is.
There you have it. Anybody building a veterinary hospital, pick two and call Jonathan. Jonathan, if people want to find your website, want to find some pictures of the work that you've done, how do they go about doing that?
www.jagreene.com. We have a lot of pictures on there, and there's a link to our Pinterest page that also has pictures, and the pictures will be specific to exam rooms, treatment areas, isolation, imaging, different facets of a building that you would need.
Well, really great to have you on the show. Ivan, now you know how to build some hospitals or who to call, so good for you guys to be connected. And Jonathan, we like to wrap up every episode the same way. So we got a couple questions for you. A book, a TED Talk, a YouTube video, something that you'd recommend to our listeners that they check out.
So the most memorable book for me is The Old Man and the Sea. As an entrepreneur and a business owner, it kind of represents the struggle that you have in the beginning and how the struggle creates the success. He couldn't catch a fish for 2 or 3 months. His employees were leaving him and going somewhere else, and he just kept grinding, and it ultimately paid off. Though his success got to his head, and he ended up losing his big catch to a bunch of sharks because his ego got in the way. So it really helps you understand that repeated failure will ultimately lead to success.
That's so cool. That's what a lot of entrepreneurs need to hear. And the second question that we asked Jonathan is there a guest that you think would be good to invite to this show?
Someone I would recommend would be Dr. Will Cole. He's very much a mentor of mine. He helped me get started in the design side of things years ago. And the way he operates his practice is just a little different, I think. It's got a little bit more of the business ownership side of running the practice, but also really appreciative of staff, always upbeat, always outgoing. He just generally does it a little bit different from what I see with other veterinarians. Not that other veterinarians do it wrong. It's just his has a little bit of a tweak to it. And we won Hospital of the Year this year with DVM 360, and it was his hospital that got it. and it was very much his brainchild. So yeah, he would be a great person for y'all to have.
Thank you so much for listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast. If you want to hear about our new episodes, please follow us on any social media channel. Also, you can check out our website at veterinarynnovationpodcast.com. See you next week.